Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our session, Achieving Equity Using Outdoor Learning. My name is Amity Sandage, and I serve as Environmental Literacy Coordinator for Santa Cruz County Office of Education. I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Heather Malloy. Heather, do you want to get off mute for a second to say hello? Introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Malloy, and I'm the director of the Santa Cruz County Outdoor Science School in normal times, and I'm the director of the Science Outside Schoolyard Childcare Program in COVID times.
Thanks. Our plan for this session is to provide a brief overview of the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, but then spend the bulk of the session sharing details of the pilot outdoor program that our county launched as an early adopter of outdoor programs during COVID. We will have some Q&A time in the middle and then wrap up with a summary of what we've learned from the pilot program and tips and resources for those interested in this approach. So next slide, please. And actually you can go one more. I'll go to the introduction. So the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative was launched last summer in late May by a coalition of partners, Green Schoolyards America, Lawrence Hall of Science, San Mateo County Office of Ed, and 10 Strands. And then within a couple months, it had grown to include partners across the country. Next slide. The mission of the initiative is to support school districts to reopen safely and equitably in COVID-19 era, and to use outdoor spaces as an effective way to maximize the number of students who can return to in-person instruction, because we know that's the best instruction for everybody. And also to support students' academic success, mental and physical health, and happiness, which we know are improved by being outdoors. Next slide. The group, which is all volunteer, divided up into working teams to take advantage of their different expertise areas and identified key planning considerations that are focused in these 10 areas: equity, outdoor infrastructure, park and school collaborations, outdoor learning and instructional models, staffing and partnerships, school program integration, community engagement, health and safety, local and state policy changes, and funding models. And then at the center of these working groups is a group of early adopters, so schools and districts and partners that were willing to test out this concept and do it in a variety of ways depending on their situation. The working groups are producing a free online how-to guide, and many of the resources are already up on the website, which you can see. I'll stick it in the chat as well. The idea is not only that this approach can solve the capacity issues that come up when students are brought back to campuses and socially distanced, and you run out of classroom space very quickly in that scenario, but that outdoor learning can remain long after COVID as a way to contribute to student engagement, to social emotional learning, to mental and physical health, and academic performance across content areas. Research shows clearly that outdoor learning benefits students in all of those ways. So these outdoor learning spaces can become long-term assets to schools. With our county's prior work in environmental literacy, we already had a strong partner base here and a local school district willing to innovate. So we really felt ready for a pilot when this happened. And before I hand over things to Heather, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on our context locally. Santa Cruz County has 10 public school districts that serve 41,000 students roughly. And 56% of our students are in our unduplicated pupil count. So students identified as English learners, receiving free or reduced price meals and/or in foster care. And that 56% is concentrated more in our southern half of our county. So our largest district, which serves half of our students, has an even higher percentage of students in that unduplicated pupil count. And in thinking, you can go to the next slide, about the risks of COVID-19, our county data shows that Latinx communities have a disproportionately high rate of infection. You can see here the small black bars represent the percentage that population is of our community countywide. So you can see clearly that our Latinx community makes up about a third of our county's population, but 60% of the cases for COVID are in that community. This is a pattern that's seen in the data of neighboring counties in the San Francisco Bay Area and across the state. And in the data in those counties includes similar disparities for African-American residents as well. We just have a smaller percentage, so the pattern doesn't come through. And we've also been looking, as I know all schools have, been looking closely at student data, both in academic performance and other data like our California Healthy Kids Survey data. We have a public data portal that disaggregates that data by groups, and looking at all of it, it's very clear that the negative impacts of COVID-19, the disconnectedness and isolation of distance learning, the challenges with technology, the reduced practice that students get with oral language if they're English learners, and the lack of supervision at home from an adult who can help with distance learning. All of those things can be catastrophic setbacks for students, but especially those that are already most vulnerable in our system. So with that, we really started with this equity lens when we found ourselves suddenly reclassified to purple in the fall. We had districts all preparing to go hybrid, but then the week before school started, we had to shift to 100% distance learning, and found ourselves suddenly with the opportunity to help a district to very quickly launch a small pilot all outdoors to provide distance learning support with small groups, and to bring in the expertise of outdoor educators in our outdoor school. And that's what became this pilot program that is now led to other small group programs serving high needs students. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Heather to describe the details of that program.
Thank you, Amity. So earlier in the fall, when we began the school year with 100% distance learning, we recognized the significant problems distance learning has caused for our students and families. Because of COVID-19, according to the New York Times, you see here more students than ever are missing class, not logging on, not checking in, or not completing assignments. And the absence rate appears particularly high in schools with many low-income students whose access to home computers and internet connections can be spotty. So with schools closed, many parents who are essential workers are faced with the impossible choice between earning a living and supervising their children. This only widens the opportunity gap for our students of color and augments the inequities that already exist in education. So as outdoor educators, we were looking outside for solutions. According to the CDC, indoor spaces are more risky than outdoor spaces, where it might be harder to keep people apart and there's less ventilation. How do we use our knowledge, experience, and expertise in outdoor learning to create the safe and innovative outdoor schools that support distance learning in a way that increases the opportunity for marginalized students? So step one was our pilot program. We call it the Science Outside Schoolyard Childcare Program. And it's a partnership between the Santa Cruz County Office of Education and one of our local districts, Santa Cruz City Schools. Our program serves children of classroom teachers and staff who need to be able to focus their time on supporting the students. It consists of small, stable cohorts with up to 12 students and 2 adults, and takes place in outdoor spaces on the school campuses. The cohorts are multi-age in order to keep siblings together, and they include elementary students from transitional kindergarten through 5th grade. So the 5 most important COVID mitigation strategies are employed, stable groups, of course, face coverings, frequent sanitization of hands and surfaces, physical distancing, and what we think most importantly, fresh air. During the morning block of time, during our program, students are in their learning stations where they receive support with their distance learning. Laptops can either be charged overnight at home or overnight at the school. We purchased several all-weather extension cords and surge protectors as well, in case a student needed to plug in during their distance learning time. Headphones are required and can be provided by the school if needed. At some sites, we use student desks and chairs that the custodians sanitize and bring indoors each afternoon and bring out again each morning. Desks are placed in the middle of the student's learning station that is outlined with tape or chalk in order to ensure a 6-foot minimum distance. Some sites have large enough picnic tables that 1 or 2 students can safely distance at a table. Each student has a 5-gallon bucket to keep any supplies not included in their backpack, like their clipboard, their own hand sanitizer bottle, a blanket to keep warm, etc. And that's transported inside each afternoon and back to their learning station each morning by the custodial staff. So when students are at their learning station, they can remove their face covering if needed. If they leave their learning station or if an instructor comes over to help them, they're required to have their face covering on. We've really found that mask wearing is very easy to enforce with our elementary students. They learn quickly what is expected. In fact, once I was visiting one of our sites and I watched a kindergartner finish his juice box. He was inside his learning station and he put on his mask unprompted and walked a few feet away to throw away his empty juice box, went back to his learning station and continued his work. You know, we recognize that staying in one place is hard when you're in elementary school. So when students need a brain break during their asynchronous learning time, they can ask an adult and leave their learning station, go for a quick run or walk or a lap around the field. If a playground is nearby, it is off limits until after lunch. Otherwise, it's a huge distraction. Before lunchtime, students must wash and sanitize their hands. One way the instructor staff make sure that the students really are washing their hands is they put marker dots on the students' hands before they go to the sink. And they must come back and show that the dots are gone. Students can then go to lunch where they sit in hula hoops that are spaced apart. And while in their hula hoop, they can remove their mask so they're able to eat. School meals are provided. After lunch, students finally have some free play time on the playground if they'd like. If they're going to go on the playground, they must wash then sanitize their hands before and after playing on the structure. And those structures are sanitized each afternoon by the custodial staff. After recess, the instructors facilitate outdoor learning opportunities like team initiatives, sit spots, science and nature exploration, also some hikes and walks if the school site allows. This part of the day is the highlight for the students. In a recent survey, parents reported that the afternoon science activities and games are the favorite part of the day for their children. So when asked what they saw as the strengths of the program, most frequently parents listed the fact that it takes place outside. These sentiments include not only the increase in COVID safety by using outside spaces, but really how happy their children were just to be outside. Studies show that in children, more time outside improves mental focus, attention span, mood, and even vision. One surveyed parent wrote, "This program meets the critical need of children for social connection, play, exploration, and nature learning that is not possible via a computer. Our 5-year-old was really struggling with distance learning because it's not developmentally appropriate nor intrinsically engaging to a student in transitional kindergarten. He is loving the opportunity to play outside and learn in the real world with the Science Outside program. He seems to be focusing and engaging better with this distance learning due to the balance he is getting with Science Outside." So this pilot program, like I said earlier, exists to support teachers so they can focus on teaching their students. But equity for students has been our ultimate goal since its creation. So after the Science Outside Schoolyard childcare program was underway, we toured every school campus with our partnering district to identify the best outdoor spaces to host these small cohorts of high need students. Meanwhile, school principals worked to identify the highest need students that should be returning to campus in small targeted cohorts, including newcomers, English learners, students with special needs, and students who consistently weren't logging in nor completing their assignments. It wasn't long before each school site was hosting up to 3 cohorts of high need students in the outdoors with hula hoops, clipboards, 5-gallon buckets, and spaced out outdoor learning spaces. Santa Cruz City Schools is now serving 237 higher needs students in academic small cohorts outdoors, and the district plans to add more students in December and January. In addition, small cohorts for music, theater, agriculture, etc., exist to help support social and emotional connections. All of these programs have been modeled after the pilot Science Outside Schoolyard Childcare program. So I've just given you a lot of information. We're going to take a moment to pause and reflect. So if you are watching this video, you can press pause and consider what information has come in to your mind and how this might apply to what you are already doing or what you'd like to be doing with your school. So now that our program has been in operation for a couple of months, I'm going to talk about some of our successes and challenges. As far as successes, one success has been the amount of work the students are getting done. In a recent survey, when asked if their child is completing more or less or about the same amount of work during their distance learning compared to at home before they were in our program, 75% of parents reported that their child is completing more work during their distance learning. Our partnering district also reports that elementary students in particular who did not have help at home are now navigating Zoom and accessing their synchronous instruction. All of this is happening out of doors, where risk of COVID transmission is lower. Another success is the socialization. Parents are reporting that their children are benefiting from this socialization and they're feeling less isolated than they did before they joined this program. Afternoon activities where they're exploring in nature, they're outside practicing science, they're doing recreation activities. This has been a favorite from the students or for the students from the beginning. And one success we've really had, as I said earlier, is students really have no problem wearing their face coverings. A couple reminders here and there, even our TK students are able to remember and keep their mask on properly. We've also had some challenges. One of them, of course, is the cold. Heaters are not allowed because of space heater. Because of the way they're designed, they could tip over and could be a hazard. So we're really encouraging sleeping bags. Students will snuggle up in their sleeping bag while they're sitting at their desk. Blankets, fleece blankets are great because if they get a little moist, they'll still keep you warm. And we in fact had a local basketball team, the Santa Cruz Warriors, donate fleece blankets to all of our students. We encourage parents to dress their students in layers, and the instructors really encourage movement breaks. One of the biggest parts about the cold we found is resilience. Surprisingly, the students have been fine and not really complaining. It's more our staff that are feeling the cold and needing to employ some of these strategies and move around more. Weather is certainly a challenge. We will have to cancel if we have severe rain and wind because of the design of our coverings. We have had rain and it hasn't been a big problem. The wet ground really is the reason we need those pre-charged laptops. Wind has been a little bit of a problem, blowing papers around. So we're using clipboards to keep papers attached. And we're thinking about also maybe having an afternoon activity where the students go hunting for a nice stone about the size of their hand that they can use as a paperweight at their desk or table. Earlier on, when we had hotter days, we of course had our activities happening in the shade, and every instructor has a spray bottle where they can put it on the mist setting and cool off the faces of the students. So our biggest challenge, I would say, is the physical distancing during free play time. Keeping the students at a physical distance of 6 feet or more has proven to be really difficult. It is the reality that the children want to connect and play without restriction, and that it is in their very nature to be next to one another, particularly during spontaneous play. The educator staff, who believe in the importance of human connection, have really struggled with the fact that they would need to be unrelenting and nearly militaristic in order to enforce this procedure. They do their best, and in the meantime, also focus on face coverings and hand washing and sanitization. I'm going to leave you with a final quote from a parent who has a child in our program that speaks to the importance of innovation and trying out new ideas. I'm really impressed with the program. So many ideas like this just stay ideas, and I'm impressed that people took the time to make it a reality. So taking distance learning outside was an idea that seemed radical to district administrators, but they were open to it. And through connection and collaboration, we made it a reality. And the result is the students are thriving. Thank you. I'll send it back to you, Amity.
Great. And I'm just going to power through the last resources here, and then we'll do Q&A time at the end instead of in the middle, because that's a perfect segue to how you take this from idea to reality. And so I just wanted to share a few key elements. There on this slide, you can see the areas that we would recommend you think about. Though they don't all have to be in place immediately, you can really start and build from one to the next, starting with gathering those key stakeholders and partners who share a common belief in this approach. So it's really important to have your champions on board. And then you can use the resources and case studies that are on that national initiative website and stories like this one, like our story, to serve as support for gathering buy-in and to expand that stakeholder group. Doing a walkthrough with outdoor education partners at your school sites to look at potential sites can really be a turning point for a lot of folks who haven't looked at the outdoors with this lens. So if you have an experienced outdoor educator who sees the potential there, it can really change the mindset of school administrators. And then you're ready to start thinking about the realities of materials and staffing, which, as Heather mentioned, don't have to be very sophisticated. The materials don't have to be expensive, and the staffing can be helped by partners. So partners are key in this work if you want to get beyond just putting desks outside and doing your indoor program outside. By having partners who understand outdoor learning, they can add capacity to your staffing, but also bring in this whole other lens of connection to nature and help train other staff who might not have that experience, and also do it at often a lower cost than adding credentialed teacher staff time. So the next slide has the range of people that an outdoor program touches. So it would be good to find a champion from each of these stakeholder groups and then have that champion really bring their insight to identify the benefits and barriers for the folks that are in that stakeholder group. And that way you'll be better prepared to bring your plan to others. The bottom right, you'll see community partners were there as one of the stakeholder groups. That you can go ahead with the slide, that's fine. Our environmental education field is in turmoil at present. Outdoor schools and field trips all got put on hold because of COVID. And these partners are as dedicated to serving your students as you are in schools, but they're outside the formal education system. So this is an opportunity for the formal education leaders to bring those folks in as partners, and they're looking for partnerships, and they're flexible and wanting to figure out how they can still reach students with the expertise that they have. In our county, the next slide, you can move to, we have partners that have become essential to the work we do to support our districts in working toward integrating environmental literacy. And in the time of COVID, we've been looking at a variety of roles they can play. From that first one that you just heard about, where Heather's staff are providing supplemental instruction that's enrichment, like the Science Outside program, in paired with the support for the distance learning, to also looking at bringing them in as partner teachers in a hybrid program so that you could have a whole classroom on campus, half of them outdoors with the partner educator and half indoors with the teacher. They can also be used as partners to help train teachers in best practices for outdoor teaching and learning, because many teachers are actually more comfortable being outdoors than indoors for their own safety and the safety of students, but they don't have as much confidence in managing students in an outdoor classroom. So we can have these partners help bring that expertise. And because we've been in 100% distance learning, many of our partners have actually been providing and designing standards-based virtual programs for distance learning programs that emphasize getting students offline and connecting with nature as part of their distance learning program from home. And so that's another way you can look to these partners to enrich your distance learning programs. And then lastly, when looking for funding to support outdoor learning, if you're partnered with these community-based partners, you can approach different funders than you might be able to on your own as a school and have a broader impact. So next slide, speaking of funding, wanted to just point out that quite a few of the school districts doing this are using CARES Act funds and focusing in on social emotional learning funds. And then you can also look toward your community foundations, your local education foundations, and city and government offices that are concerned about public education for sustainability and climate resilience and natural resource management often have some education funds earmarked that could become potential funding sources. County and state parks have education programs that you could tap into, and youth development organizations may not have the environmental literacy focus, but have a lot to offer in terms of experience working with students in outdoor settings, like city parks, and focusing on social emotional learning. So those are all good places to look. And lastly, I wanted to point you toward a resource. There's a series of webinars that have been created by a coalition of county offices of education focused on environmental literacy in the California public school system. And these include a webinar on networking with community-based partners and connecting to curriculum and instruction. And I'll put the links to all of these in the chat. Next slide. That will lead you to a document that has an overview of how environmental literacy can support local control accountability plans and the MTSS framework. And all of that is found at the Cali website, which is the next slide. And I'm putting this in the chat. Recommend that you get on their mailing list to get all the resources that are available there in future. And they're connected with the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative too, so you'll get information on that as well. So there are all of the links again, and let's wrap up with any questions.
So if you want to unmute, if you have a question, now would be a great time to just speak up and let us know what you're wondering. I do have a question myself, which is, and you kind of partially answered it. I was interested to see that you're partnering with the public works departments in Santa Cruz and in Watsonville. How exactly are the cities supporting you?
They offer, both of those departments have education programs. So City of Watsonville has a pretty extensive program where they offer every 4th and 5th grade class in Pajaro Valley Unified a field trip to their water treatment plant and their waste management facility. And the City of Santa Cruz also has one at their Daimio Lane facility for waste management. So they've been partners in putting together sequences of field experiences for students that match with the curriculum at the grade level that's happening in the classroom, and trying to have those outdoor field trips be really embedded in part of the classroom instruction. And now with this shift to virtual learning, a lot of those experiences are being turned into distance learning experiences as well. Although those two particular partners have not developed lesson sequences in that way yet.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before
This is Stella. I unfortunately have a meeting at 10:30. I'm gonna have to get off, but I appreciate everything. Thank you. I have a quick question. I saw the children with their computers outside. I was just wondering, how did you remediate the glare situation, because at least, you know, for me, when I go outside with my computer, it's a bit challenging. Is there a trick to it, or?
Yeah, so the main remediation we have is you might have noticed they were all under some sort of shade structure. And so I've had to, with the way that rearrange some of the students, the space that we have put their learning station does allow for some moving without encroaching on the 6 feet distancing. And then the students have they're amazingly, even TK, gotten really good at moving their screen up and down so that they can see it.
Moving it up.
You know, just a quick pro tip on that with our instructors, we started getting them rolling stools, because what happens is when they walk up to help a student, they'll lean over, and, you know, if the screen's down, they're like cranking their neck up, and they were starting to have pain from like looking at the screens without the glare. And so we got them some rolling stools so they can kind of roll around and look straight on. But I'd say between finding the shade and then the students adjusting the screen, it hasn't been a problem.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I appreciate everything. I have to go now, okay?
Thank you for coming.
Great work. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you, Amity and Heather, very much for a really, really informative, interesting presentation.